we are at the end, we are entering the post-industrial age. And the nature of work is fundamentally becoming undefined. And it will be undefined for a while. So our big customers today are saying, we don't know exactly what works. And I say to them, right. And you won't figure that out in the next month. So let's recognize that over the next 3 or 4 years, everything's going to change, and you're going to figure out a new way to employ people, a new way to engage people in the efforts of work. You're going to develop a new level of trust, all kinds of new agreements with not just your existing generation, but the new generation coming in, which is really, really buying into some different concepts. So I think if you're going to do that, you do need to have agility.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Dimitri Boylan, who's a Vice President and CEO at Avature. During the discussion, we talk about the next generation of HR technology and how companies can drive digital transformation in the new world of work. As always, before we jump into the video, make sure you hit that subscribe button now, turn on the notification bell, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. With that being said, let's jump in. Welcome to the show, Dimitri. How are you?
I'm good, doing well. How are you, Chris?
I'm good. I think you win the award for the best chandelier.
Shard.
Yeah.
Shard, and they went big on chandeliers.
Yeah, you would think so. It's in the name, really, right? So they were like,
oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're
Yes.
in London.
It's almost the chandelier upside down itself.
Yeah, that is true as well. Yeah, it's a good design. So what brings you to London?
Oh, my child is going to uni.
Oh,
I'm delivering her.
How does that feel? They're moving out. Is it like, as a parent, how does that feel?
Well, the children, when they move out, they're much happier than the parents are.
Yeah, I noticed.
It's like, we're gone, out of here.
Yeah. Is that the last one out now, or you?
No, it's the first one out.
Oh,
so
the first one out.
This is not traumatic.
Not yet, anyway. No.
Right.
Yeah, not anyway. Look, before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about your personal journey to where we are now.
Oh, well, I was born and felt good about that. It's been, I guess, I still have to go back to hotjobs.com, which was a company that I co-founded in '96, which was really the beginning of sort of and before that I was a headhunter. Okay. But the beginning of sort of tying technology to HR. I guess you could think of it as HR. We didn't think of it as HR at that time. And I think, because I had done work with supercomputers before that, but, it had nothing to do with business, right? It was all just science. So sort of brought, technology together with the recruiting, and the internet was really the perfect place to do that. So it was about the browser and the creation of the internet. And we created an online database, and we created an online posting system so people could go in and do HTML in 1996 and put an ad on the web, and nobody wanted to do it. We called a lot of people and asked them to do it. And we finally called Apple Computer, and they said, well, there's nobody on your system, so why should we put anything on it? We said, well, we still think it's a good idea for you to do it. And they said, well, we like the system, so we're going to do it. So Nice. They paid us, and they posted their jobs. Because job boards before that were actually, you had to fax your job description into the job board. And then in the job board, you could get the address and you could send your resume. And so we created an online resume database, and we created an online posting system. And we thought, that was just a better way to do it. Yeah. We didn't think deeply about it. Yeah. So we kind of became popular on the West Coast, and then we kind of did well throughout the whole United States. And we went public, we got acquired. I mean, it's a public company, and Yahoo came and bought the shares. So when I came back into HR and tech, I sort of started with what I thought was a big pain point, which was sourcing on the internet, because the internet was huge. There was tons of data out there. But it didn't mean that it was easier to find what you wanted. So we focused on sourcing through multiple systems with a federated search system. Then we got into CRM and engagement and stayed away from the whole applicant tracking market for, I'd say probably 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
I think that helped us to focus on things that were newer and had impact, but that companies weren't yet doing. And that's a great way to come into the market, usually.
When you was looking at coming into the market, what were the questions you were asking yourself in terms of what makes us different? You know, there's so many different platforms and solutions out there. What was the thought process?
Well, we started doing CRM for recruiting, and actually for about 5 or 6 years, there was no other system doing it. And we used to have companies say to us, look, we want to bake you off against 2 other companies. So can you recommend 2 more companies that do CRM for recruiting? And our answer was always, well, we can't really. So for a while there, we sort of had the market to ourselves, which is a good thing. Obviously, the market then crowded up after that. It became an interesting space, and lots of other companies started creating systems, and it became more like a normal competitive marketplace.
Yeah. What's top of mind for you right now, especially given the last couple of years that we've had behind us?
Well, we several years ago, we were sort of pushing the agility idea, right? Because we thought that the way CRMs were built were more conducive to that type of thing. In marketing, you do things. If they work, you do more. The things that don't work, you don't do as much, right? And you sort of figure out what works. And recruiting was kind of like marketing. You couldn't really define what was going to work.
Yeah. Okay.
You go out there, you do things. Some things work, some things don't. So you need to constantly change your game. So we loved the idea that agility was becoming popular as a concept. I think we had a little more trouble when we got deeper into HR functionality with the agility message. They liked the buzzword, but a lot of their tech was really not agile at all. So I think the big thing that happened in the last couple of years was that we realized that agility really is the essential thing that you need. We are at the end, we are entering the post-industrial age. And the nature of work is fundamentally becoming undefined, and it will be undefined for a while. So our big customers today are saying, we don't know exactly what works. And I say to them, right. And you won't figure that out in the next month. So let's recognize that over the next 3 or 4 years, everything's going to change, and you're going to figure out a new way to employ people, a new way to engage people in the efforts of work. You're going to develop a new level of trust, all kinds of new agreements with not just your existing generation, but the new generation coming in, which is really, really buying into some different concepts. So I think if you're going to do that, you do need to have agility.
Yeah. It's quite refreshing, your response there, because there's so many companies who claim to have all the answers to their clients.
I think so. But our customers are very big companies, and they know when you talk at the top level, they know they don't have the answers. I think they know that, and I think this is important at the C level, because the relationship between HR and the other executives, the HR executives and the non-HR executives, is also really changing. I've seen that now with the people that I talk to. And 10 years ago, your CFO, your CEO, they could look at the CHRO and say, keep everything steady state. That's your job. We're going to think about something new to do, but you guys keep the world, keep us out of trouble. Okay. That's not the relationship now.
Yeah.
It's just a fundamentally different relationship.
Definitely. Something I'd love you to touch on for the audience, you mentioned it in our last call, was this distinction and the mistake that companies are making between HR transformation versus digital transformation. I felt that was quite fascinating. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So, I don't want to go back to ERP. ERP took off in the 1980s, and it was the idea that, you could lock down the business and make it super efficient using technology. And technology was an efficiency tool at that time, right? And so, organizations built up a lot of on-prem. It was pre-internet, so everything was on-prem. So on your premises, you built up a huge tech stack. You locked in the software, and you tried to make everybody use it so that you could get a little 2% more efficiency to become competitive. Okay, it was a great model. It worked for 25 years, 30 years. Okay, the model broke down with the internet. The internet broke the model. Okay. So I think the first thing that the tech community started doing was they were saying, well, we need to do a digital transformation. And they defined that digital transformation, a lot of it around moving to the cloud.
Yeah.
Which is great. You go from this system that had hidden costs, and you have a huge number of threat vectors, and you have to evolve this technology. And there's a lot of challenges in running that organization, and it's running up a big bill. And that was fine to spend a lot of money on technology when technology was doing exactly what you wanted it to do. It was defending you. It was making a little bit more, everything more efficient. But when it showed up being not fit for purpose, when the internet came along, and the response rate that companies had to changing the way they did technology, to change the way the business worked, was really slow. Okay, they realized they needed to do this digital transformation. And what it came out is let's move our systems to the cloud. Let's get rid of the hidden costs. Let's pass some of this work off to third parties that are going to spend more time fine-tuning certain things. And the IT organization will focus on risk management and enterprise architecture and helping the customer understand their internal customers understand the data and vetting the vendors that run the systems. Okay, great. That's your digital transformation. I talk to a lot of CHROs, and sometimes they say, well, I'm locked in this big, transformation. It's an HR transformation because we're moving to the cloud. And I say, well, wait a minute. That's not an HR transformation. That's a digital transformation. That's an IT transformation. Okay. The HR transformation is changing the way you present work to your employees, changing the way employees move through their employment life cycle, changing the way you get employees engaged in the things that you want them to be engaged in. That's an HR transformation. And it has a technical component to it. Okay. But it's not moving to the cloud.
Mm. Can you do both at the same time? Should you do both at the same time?
All of my customers are doing both at the same time.
Mm.
And that's fine, but I don't think you want to confuse the two.
Yeah.
There's overlap between them.
What's the repercussions of doing that? What's the downside?
I think if you think the HR transformation is going to be managed by the IT organization, you're just out of luck. I was at a conference and I was speaking, and it was an HR audience, and I asked the audience, I said, how many of your CIOs came to this event? Okay. And the answer was 0.
Yeah, exactly.
0. Okay. So, as we talk about what you need to do in HR, you need to recognize that, yes, you can bring some of your HR IT team with you, but you can't get your HR strategy from your IT organization. And you can't get it from the CIO. And he's not pretending to do that. But what you can't also allow to happen is have the tech organization say, we have such a big transformation to do technology-wise, because, we're behind. Okay, we need to do this, that you now need to put this other transformation on the back burner, because that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the things that are being overlooked by HR leaders and tech vendors at the moment?
Well, I think, tech vendors are mostly selling software that was designed 15 years ago. Okay. And, that's because of the economic model of software. Okay. As a business. Because of that, it's just the functionality, even if it was best of breed 15 years ago, it's not fit for purpose today. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that, the buyer has a problem with that. The HR buyer is struggling with the legacy systems not being right for what they need to do, and with the purchasing choices being other legacy systems.
Yeah, basically.
or they're forced to go with that brand new startup where the paint is not dry, which for big companies is usually not a good option because it doesn't get through the infosec, it doesn't get through the legal department. You're bringing in something where, the company itself is really kind of new and doesn't have a good operating history. So you're kind of caught between two hard spots right there. So I think for the HR buyer, they're having a tough time of this right now.
Yeah. Well, how do you navigate that then with your own organization?
I think, I don't want to sound like, because it's not just Avature maybe, but I think that if you're a company that is continuously building new product and evolving your product, Avature does 26 releases a year. Okay. I recognized in 2004 that the best thing about SaaS was that you could continuously develop your product. It was the best thing, hands down. Okay. So we have 400 core engineers out of 1,300 employees because we can constantly code. And I think the good thing about that is that you can constantly adjust your product to what's changing in the market. And the market is now changing at an incredibly fast pace. So I think I'm feeling good about our position. We build a product that's designed to be flexible, so you can change it a lot, and we enhance it constantly.
Elaborate on that a little bit, that the way you designed it to be flexible, because I thought that also was quite unique. When I speak to your customers and your colleagues, that's something they point out, but I think maybe goes overlooked.
Yeah. So, when we're in a sales process, the IT organization often comes into the process and says, well, you're validating this vendor. We need to validate the vendor. Send us the data model. And, we say, there is no data model. They say, what do you mean there's no data model? I said, there's no data model until you start implementing the system. Okay. You create your data model when you start designing the system. And then they say, well, what are your, let me see your APIs. And we say, well, you haven't configured the system, so you haven't created any yet. So you create your data model first, and then you create the doorways that go in and out to that thing. You can't create the doorway to something that you haven't created yet.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the workflows. Now, people are more used to having some configurability in workflows, but the truth of the matter is there's an infinite amount of configurability that you can put in workflows. And we've been building our workflow engine for the last 15 years, and we still have a roadmap that goes out 3 or 4 or 5 years because processes are complex. And so, for us, it's like a giant Lego set, that you
Why
can.
Why did you do that? What are the benefits of that?
The benefits of that is that, well, for our customers are huge companies and they're global companies. So the whole idea that you could do just any global company, the idea that they can do everything the same everywhere is just not true. You know what I mean? You got an operation in China, you got operations in Germany, you got operations in the US, you got California law coming in and changing the way you do business in the US. You've got, the European Union now looking at artificial intelligence and deciding how much of that can be done. You have the New York law about AI not making decisions. You have, if you're a bank, you have global compliance issues and regulatory authorities all over the world. It's endless, right? There's an endless amount of complexity out there. And I think one thing you learn if you do science is, and we're going to jump to science, but you can't artificially reduce complexity. You create new issues. The best thing to do is model the way you need to operate. Because what you think of as complex, you go to your German manager, they don't think it's complex. They're like, no, that's the way we work in Germany. That's it. You know what I mean? And when you go to somebody in the United States, you say, how do you work? And say, this is how we work. You say, okay, if you stand above all of that, you might have a tendency to think, oh, that's very complex, but it's on the ground, it's not. And the system needs to be able to accommodate everybody in every place. And that's how you get away from system workarounds, things that go outside the system because, well, we don't use the system to do that. We're on Excel because of, they bought this system in another part of the world They bought some design idea that was created by some software company 10 years before that. And, we don't do business like that. So I'm over here on my Excel spreadsheet running my business. And then you say, well, okay, but what about the privacy issues on that? And you're like, that's a problem.
Because that's what happens, right? They kind of buy these off-the-shelf products, right, that are kind of supposedly plug and play, but they end up spending years customizing it. Whereas you could do that in the beginning whereas your own software, you may spend more time up front configuring it, but it's configured in the right way for your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite frankly, if it's easy to configure, it's no big deal if you change the configuration. Remember that when you bought SAP, you had to get it almost right the first time because you'd spend $30 million and you'd go live on this thing, and no manager wanted to go and say, hey, wait a minute, I left something out.
Yeah.
Like, what?
It's the stress.
That's like, hang this person, they left something out. If the system is easily configurable from the UI, you have a meeting, you open up the sandbox, you come up with a new configuration that you like, and you migrate it to production. And if you can do all of that in a couple of weeks with, a series of meetings and, essentially almost no cost, you are a digital business. And that's what the internet companies were doing. That's what I was doing in my internet company. We had a meeting, and 2 weeks later, the site was different. Nobody's hitting this button over here. Good. On Monday, it's over there.
or it's gone. Or it's gone. You don't need it. Yeah.
Or it's gone.
Yeah.
That was the internet experience.
Yeah.
And the most fit corporations of the future are going to have that experience. That the way they do business, is instantaneously or near instantaneously enabled on their technology. And if that's working well, then the HR organization cannot focus on the issues around that, and they can focus on getting the employee company relationship right.
Yeah.
And thinking about the things that are going to reshape the way people engage and work inside the organization. I always say to my team, our job is to make sure that our customers can almost get to the point where they feel like our system is invisible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should just work in the background, right?
It should just work in the background. And they should be able to come in the morning and say, we did this thing this way. It's no longer viable. We need to do it another way. I remember going into a big implementation with a big consulting company that was kind of running the project, and they wanted to do all the modeling on Visio. And our guy said, well, we don't use Visio. They said, how can you not use Visio? We said, no, we actually do it on the system.
Yeah, exactly.
We just build it. You just build it.
Yeah.
Then you run it.
And then see what happens, right?
Right. And if you don't like what happens, you rebuild it.
Yeah, it sounds so obvious. It sounds so obvious when you put it that way.
I personally think it is obvious.
So why do all these companies continue to do it the old way? Is it just because it's so hard to change because they're already set in that way?
Well, they invested a huge amount of money. That ERP model of locking everything down and getting that 3% efficiency, they invested 40 years of huge amount of money in building that infrastructure. Okay. My customers are not the people who manage that infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay. They can't wake up, I talked to CHRO, they can't wake up and say, the tech organization is 10 years behind and I'm going to go fix it. It's not an option for them.
No.
Now, it's just not. So it's going to take time to change. And I think that's the race. That's that transformation race that we're seeing in industry right now, where companies are trying to figure out how long is it going to take for them to get to that new spot, because you have competitive risks until you get there.
And that's the downside, right? That is the risk, right? You said it is a competitive advantage.
It's a competitive, technology is a competitive, technology is now the sword, not the shield. Okay. It still has to be a shield, but it's the sword as well.
Love that.
And so you have to start wielding it. You know what I mean? And so if you're told you have to wait 5 more years to get the sword in your hand as a manager, that's a problem. And that's even showing up in the recruiting as a recruiting issue, because when people come in now to work in a company, they're very concerned about what technology they're going to be getting to use.
Yeah.
Because if they're going to get stuck on yesterday's technology, they might only be able to deliver yesterday's solution as a manager.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they might not succeed.
What are you given? I know when we last spoke, there's a lot of product innovations that are coming forward off the back of the recent a couple of years that we've had behind us. What are some of the things you're working on that what are you most excited about? Let me just put it that. Let me just ask that.
Well, I'm excited, for Avature, we have a whole bunch of engines. We have a workflow engine, we have an AI engine, we have frameworks, and our system is built based on these engines and frameworks. The thing I'm excited about is really, well, we have a portal builder. We're going a little more as our customers get, this is what I'm excited about. As our customers get more and more muscular and confident on the platform, they're beginning to do more and more things. Okay. And so like at this user conference next week, we actually have the tech track. Okay. And we see the tech people coming to the event. So our CHRO and down, leadership, they come to the event. Okay, that's great, but they haven't been able to get tech to come. Now we're getting tech to come.
Nice.
And the tech and it's great because they're getting under the hood and understanding the frameworks and beginning to recognize what they can do with our platform. They say, so wait a minute, you mean I can build any portal and put any workflow in any portal?
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, that's what you can do. And they're starting to recognize the opportunity there to get back to creating systems, because some of our big IT customers had gone all to buying software where they lost control over the design. Okay.
They're at the mercy of the
30,
vendor.
40 years ago, they actually built things. Then they went to software where they couldn't build anything themselves except the integration points. Okay. And now they're realizing that if you have the right platform, you can actually start to create things that will work. Okay. And I think I'm excited about that. They're excited about that. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah. What's the one thing that you've learned from them recently in terms of the way they configure and use it? Because I'm sure it must be really interesting to see how different companies utilize the platform.
It is.
What was your
and we have
learning?
some companies that have really surprised me. Some of those companies are companies that didn't buy other software. They built their own for many years, and they moved to Avature because the cost of building their own was just, too much. I mean, they actually spent a lot of money on it. They have a lot of money. They're big companies, and they are really putting a lot of tech resources and analysts, into the program. And I think, what I'm learning from them is that they need a certain, this digital and HR transformations are so important that my customers don't want to be disassociated from the mechanisms that define their success. Okay. They want to be able to lift up the hood and twist a gear. Okay. Because it's really important. And they may not want to do that every day. Okay. But they don't want to be
a passenger. They don't want to be a passenger.
They don't want to be a pure passenger.
Yeah.
Okay. They want a seat in the cockpit.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's like an important mission. Okay. And so what we're working on is how to design that so they can be really well informed, so that they can do the things they want to do and give the things they don't want to do to us or even to somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay. But have the guardrails in place, because we're talking about big production systems.
Yeah. When you think about from zoom out from this sky level view, what would you say is your overall, what is the purpose behind what you do?
I think everybody that's doing these things have slightly different purposes, right? Obviously my customer has a purpose, my employee has a purpose, I have a purpose. I think partly we're trying to prove that technology can be. I say to my HR customers, I say, you kind of have to be technologists yourself too.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to prove that you can be a technologist and be something else at the same time. Okay. And I give an example. I say a lot of people are afraid of technology. They think, well, I don't understand what's inside that box. Okay. And I say to them, there's boxes and there's boxes and there's boxes. And you're just sitting in one of those boxes, one of those layers. Okay. But if you're a technologist, okay, and you're an applications programmer and you're a great applications programmer, you're not a DBA. You know something about it, but you don't know what the DBA knows. Okay. And the person who works on the firmware knows something that the application guy doesn't know. Everybody has an area that they can know about technology and then a whole bunch of areas where they don't know about technology.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes people that don't come up in the technology world think that technology person knows everything in technology, and they don't. So you just have to know the part of technology that you need to know to be a technologist. Yeah. The DBA has to really understand how the database engine works. Okay. But they don't have to understand how the C compiler works. And so what is it that you as a business person that is going to use technology for the rest of your career needs to know about technology? And I always say one day I'm going to run a CHRO 2-day event where all I do is bring them in there and we debate and discuss and explore just how much technology you need to know.
Let's make that happen. I'll do that with you.
Okay. I'll do that with you.
Let's do that.
Okay. Because once you understand that, you just
yeah.
Oh, I can't get pushed around. I understand I need to know. There's always somebody that knows more. That's not important.
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay? About something. Okay. So I'm kind of trying to do that. And I don't know that and proving that technology can be reduced to fundamental building blocks that then if you know how to use them, you can do lots of different things. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's the new state of technology. I think that's where it's going.
And that's also exciting as well. Like as an entrepreneur, when we started this company, I was amazed when we first started looking at building our apps and building our website that everything was building blocks. I was like, I don't even know how to code. Now we've just built our own website. We're launching our own OTT app, which is kind of like a Netflix. I thought I'd have to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on it, but I was like, there's building blocks that I can bring this together, and it's amazing.
Chris, pop music is building blocks, but guess what? So is Bach.
Yeah.
Building blocks are how innovation. So I talk to my customer about innovation, and I say innovation is a layer cake, and you need to know where you are applying your innovation. You're not going to innovate at this layer down here. Somebody else is. You're going to innovate at a certain layer, and you have to define what that layer is for yourself, where you're going to innovate. And once you get comfortable with that layer and the boundaries between that layer and the other layers, you get comfortable with your building blocks. Everybody uses building blocks. Even a person who's building an OpenStack framework is using building blocks. AWS is a collection of building blocks. You know what I mean? In the cloud, it's all building blocks.
Even my random comment, but even my daughter, I just started her doing a coding course, and she does it using building blocks. And she doesn't even realize she's coding. She just puts the building blocks together, and behind each block is the code. And she just visualizes it through the building blocks, and it makes sense to do that. Last question.
It's a compiler doing garbage collection.
Yeah.
And you don't need to know about that.
No,
because the C++ programmer had to know about that. And then the Java programmer didn't need to know about it anymore. Garbage collection got taken care of, during while the system was being compiled, and suddenly, the programmer was at a different level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still, it's just a different technologist.
Yeah.
So your children are just becoming like my children. They're just becoming more comfortable in the zone that they're in. And the new generation, does want to have more control over their technology. And I think this idea that don't touch the technology, it's too complicated for you, was a message in corporate America that was given to the non-tech people for too long. And so, the new generation doesn't accept that. It's no. Yeah. I build I add apps to my phone. I want control over my PC. I want control over my life. And I think it's going to have a very big digital component to it, and the digital component to my career. And I need to have some level of control over that.
Yeah. Listen, last question before I let you go. What would be your parting advice that you'd give to HR executives out there?
I think the focus, I think you have to spend some time getting the digital, your digital understanding at a place where you can, use it as a tool. You must get to where the technology is the tool that you use to sort out, this next 10 years of relationship between employee and employer. And I think it's, the other thing I would say to them, it's a great time to be in HR.
Yeah,
it really is. All the old ideas are being shattered. Yeah. Right. So it's a time for the whiteboard. It's time to be creative in HR. And, HR is really right at the C-suite table right now saying, how do we take this company into the future? So it's a great thing. Don't be afraid of technology. Figure out how to be creative and get things implemented that are, closer to the right answer over time, mm-hmm. right? And that it becomes an experiment, it's an experimental process to find out what's going to work. It's a great time to be doing that. Don't be afraid of technology.
You're so right. It's like, yes, it's a tough time to be in HR, but there's definitely the most exciting time. In many ways, businesses are now coming to HR saying, what do we do? It's kind of flipped completely on its head, the other way around. And I think one of the other fears, which you kind of just mentioned, is there is this no such thing as we just get it right the first time. There's got to be this agile experimentation process, failing forward. And that's how you can't be afraid to make mistakes. As well, that is the way that you need to work.
Absolutely. You see it probably in your own business. You started with one idea.
I've pivoted a million times. Yeah, it doesn't work. Well, listen, thanks for coming on. Last thing, where can people reach you? If you want people to reach out to you personally, say hi, say hello.
Well, so I'm on LinkedIn, of course, but also I'm, Dimitri at Avature.net.
Great.
And that's a really good way to reach me.
Amazing. Well, thanks for coming on the show. For everyone listening, those links will be below. So connect with Dimitri on LinkedIn. His email will also be in the description wherever you are. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day and we'll see you again soon. Thanks a lot, Dimitri. Enjoy the rest of your trip in London and I'll see you again soon.
Chris, it was a pleasure talking to you. Take care.
Bye.